Welcome to the podcast, everyone. Today we're diving into an intriguing blend of neuroscience and inner self-discipline, kind of a roadmap to understanding and training the self using the brain's secrets.
Sounds fascinating. So where do we start with this comparison between the brain and our inner desires?
Right? So, the central idea is that advancements in brain research and imaging allow us to see a live, working brain, not just the diseased one. This evolution gave rise to a host of neurodisciplines like neurology, but also neuropsychology, neuromarketing, neurotheology, and even neurojurisprudence. The common thread, the brain.
Absolutely. It's really like a whole new frontier where the brain is both our laboratory and our playground. So we're essentially using real-time data on brain responses to understand complex internal phenomena, right?
Exactly. And it moves beyond just observing pathology. We're now peeking into the brain when it's actively engaged in everyday activities. This is crucial when we talk about something like Nöroterbiye, which is essentially using neuroscience to train and discipline our inner self, often referred to as nefs.
That word nefs always intrigued me. It's got so many meanings, doesn't it? It encompasses not only the idea of the self, but also something like those base animalistic desires.
Yes, exactly. Traditionally, nefs has been defined in a plethora of ways, ranging from life force or soul to the more concrete bodily desires that can, if left unchecked, lead us into disasters. Think of it as the kind of impulse that, if misdirected, can completely derail your well-being.
Right. So, the text essentially suggests that our brain is the headquarters for this nefs, and by understanding the brain through neuroscience, we can get ahead of these impulses. Is that about right?
Yeah, that's it. It's like using the advances in neurobiology to map out our desires. For example, when we experience immediate pleasures or impulses, like say the allure of a tempting snack or the lure of social media, the brain releases chemicals such as dopamine for desire, serotonin for that sense of reward related to fame, and cortisol when stress strikes.
And that's so interesting because it basically ties our everyday emotional experiences to very concrete biological markers.
Precisely. It draws a parallel. The nefs we discuss in classical texts corresponds, in many cases, to these biochemical activities in the brain. For instance, the notion of nefsi azdirer, the idea that unchecked desire leads us astray, is explained in modern terms as disrupting the organization in our brain's reward system.
Yeah, that's neat. I find that analogy really compelling. It's like our ancient wisdom and modern science meet in the brain. But a thought just struck me. Aren't some critics skeptical about reducing such a complex, almost existential concept as nefs to mere brain chemistry?
That's a fair challenge. You see, while some purists argue that nefs is a metaphysical idea beyond biology, the text suggests that since Islamic scholars pinpointed the brain as the locus for nefs, it makes sense to explore it via neuroscience. And the approach isn't to diminish the spiritual aspect, but to provide a pragmatic framework for self-discipline using accessible biological concepts.
Got it. So it's more of a complementary perspective rather than an outright reduction of spirituality.
Exactly. It bridges the gap. And then there's the structured approach in the book. First, it explores the biological underpinnings, like understanding those chemicals, dopamine for lust, serotonin for that craving for recognition, and cortisol for stress or gadab.
Yep. And then they move on to how these brain chemicals affect our everyday actions, right? How, say, environmental factors fuel these impulses.
Right. It goes into how modern life is riddled with what the text calls helela, or tricks, aimed at triggering these reactions. On one side, you have seemingly innocent stimuli like food ads, pervasive screens, even catchy music that appeals to our nifs. On the flip side, there are more harmful agents like drugs, alcohol, and even certain addictive behaviors like gambling and excessive pornography.
Yeah, absolutely. So, in essence, our environment is practically engineered to spike these brain chemicals, making it all too easy for the nefs to run wild.
Exactly. And that's why the book dedicates a whole section to differentiating between masum, or seemingly harmless, triggers and those that are overtly damaging. It categorizes them to help us see which ones are leading us into increased impulsivity and ultimately self-destruction.
And that ties into the practical side of the discussion, the actual process of Nöroterbiye, or basically training the nefs using our understanding of brain science.
Right you are. The final sections of the book focus on actionable strategies. They talk about developing, personalized to-do lists to help discipline these impulses. It's about first recognizing the patterns in how our brain operates, and then using lifestyle changes like improved nutrition, exercise, even practices akin to a dopamine detox, which they mention is a practice during Ramadan to help recalibrate our brains.
Yeah, that really makes it accessible. That's fascinating. So it's like a holistic program that not only informs us, but also provides ways to practice self-discipline through leveraging neurobiology.
Absolutely. And one of the critical points the book raises is about individual differences. It emphasizes that nefs can vary greatly based on gender, age, and cultural background. There's even talk about how mirror neurons play a role in how we interact, how others' actions can affect our own brain chemistry.
I like that. Yeah, it's like our brains are fine-tuned by both internal impulses and external influences, making each person's journey to self-discipline a unique one.
Exactly. And then there's an interesting bit about how the book contrasts the tangible, measurable aspects of brain functions with the more subjective and philosophical perspectives on the self. It deliberately avoids an overt metaphysical debate and instead opts for a more ethical, practical, almost, moral guide on how to live.
Right. I do wonder, though, while the scientific parallels are super interesting, isn't there a risk of oversimplifying the deep spiritual experiences into just chemical reactions?
That's a valid concern. The text does acknowledge this tension, but its stance is that the biological perspective provides a concrete starting point for change. It's like using a map to navigate a complex city. The map doesn't capture every nuance of the city's soul, but it sure helps you know where to turn.
I like that analogy. It's like the brain gives us a blueprint, even if it doesn't capture the entire essence of what it means to be human.
Exactly. And then it moves on to offering corrective measures. It discusses, for instance, how reducing harmful habits gradually rebalances brain chemicals, how a balanced diet and proper sleep are not just physical remedies, but in a sense also a way to train the nefs.
Yeah, that makes complete sense. So it's not only about restraint, but also about actively engaging in behaviors that promote brain health and, by extension, self-control.
Yep, like a positive feedback loop. It's very holistic. And a cool point they make is that our environment, even the people around us, can act as mirrors through mirror neurons, reinforcing either positive or negative behaviors.
That's a reminder of just how interconnected we are. Our personal battles with nefs aren't fought in isolation, but are, in part, influenced by our communities.
Spot on. And in wrapping it all together, the book encourages fostering a growth mindset where change is possible. It stresses the belief in our own ability to refine our behaviors and, essentially rewire our brain to favor healthier impulses.
Right, that's empowering. It definitely is. It reminds me a bit of the idea of neuroplasticity, our brain's ability to change and adapt. That's such a hopeful message.
Absolutely. And so, to recap, the conversation we're exploring weaves together modern neuroscience with age-old ethical questions. It analyzes how our internal desires, driven by biochemical reactions, can either steer us towards success or, if left unchecked, into, chaos.
Exactly. And by taking a closer look at these neural mechanisms, we get a roadmap not only for understanding ourselves, but also for effectively managing our impulses in today's overly stimulating world.
Right on. It's like having both a scientific manual and a personal development guide rolled into one. The insights about dopamine, serotonin, and cortisol connect our everyday experiences to a deeper, almost existential process.
Yep. I appreciate how this perspective doesn't just leave us with abstract knowledge, but offers practical steps to harness these insights for real personal growth.
Exactly. It's about recognizing the battle within, the nefs, and using modern tools to win that battle. And when you think about it, if ancient teachings already pointed to the brain as the seat of our inner struggles, why not use every scientific advantage we have?
Yeah, I see that. Well, it's been a really enlightening conversation. I feel like we've peeled back a few layers on something that touches both science and spirit.
Definitely. And for anyone looking to balance the scales between natural impulses and conscious living, understanding the brain is key. Here's to more empowered self-discipline, guided by the marvels of neuroscience.
Absolutely. Thanks for tuning in, everyone. Let's keep exploring, questioning, and, well, growing together.